Welcome everyone. I'm Dejannie Martin, and I'm your host for Diversity in Online Teaching and Learning, Asynchronous. In the beginning, can everyone see my screen? Please use your phones because I can't see you and share screen. So use your microphone so I can hear you. So I got to know a little bit about some of you do teach synchronous, some of y'all teach hybrid, some of y'all teach asynchronous, and a variety of different subjects. And I'm really, really happy about teaching this course because we all have problems when we are teaching online, and especially asynchronous, because of the fact that we have a lot of students from different backgrounds, carry different skills, and it becomes difficult that we need to learn more tools in order to engage our students. So teaching this particular subject is really near and dear to me. So let me just let you know a little bit about my background. I've been teaching asynchronous now for about 10 years. I also taught in the classroom. I've been teaching overall about 15 years. And I love asynchronous teaching. I love in the class teaching. And one of the things I started doing when I first started teaching asynchronously is trying to convert what I do in the classroom to what I do online with the students. And it's been challenging, and I know it's been challenging to all of us, and I constantly have to keep reinventing myself and coming up with new techniques every day. But, you know, I look at myself as a work in progress, and every semester I look at changing different things about how I set up my courses. So the first thing I want to do today is in the chat area, or we can use the microphone perhaps. Provide me with a short definition of what you believe asynchronous learning means to you and to your students. If someone wants to talk, you could talk, or if someone wants to put in the chat, that's fine too, but I would prefer talking. So can someone tell me, give me a short definition of what you believe asynchronous learning means to you and your students?
Well, I don't know if this is a definition, but I mean, I think that it means that students and faculty can engage in learning on their own schedules and utilize all the different technical resources that come along with that. It's kind of short perspective for me.
Chloe said students can learn in the time frame that they're available and effective, and I could do the same thing when teaching. Excellent. Kathleen said flexibility, independence, difficult to build relationships. Absolutely. Nancy said learning that occurs at a different time and places. Anyone else before we move on? I mean, all of it sounds good. All right, so some of the somebody else wanted to add something? All right, so asynchronous learning is pretty much what most of you said, learning that is fully online. Interaction between the instructor and student is not at the same time. Content can be accessed within flexible time frames, which is really important for most people, and that's why they transition over to asynchronous learning. Students can go at their own pace. That's an important piece. Students can access the course at any location or at any time. Best for students who have a busy work or personal schedule. And I think that because, I mean, asynchronous courses have always been around, but I think that they have increased more because of the pandemic. And as a result, our lives have changed. And a lot of people seek now more and more to do asynchronous learning. But I think the problem comes in is when a lot of instructors feel frustrated. I've been in a lot of trainings with other instructors. And that's like the main thing I hear that's common among instructors is how can I engage my students more? How do I know that they're learning what they're supposed to learn? And interactions with them. I want to increase the interaction. Somebody put that in the chat, that interaction is difficult. And some said, how do I make my course pop? You know, make students go, wow, I like this course. And, you know, it is, like I said, it's an ongoing teaching skill, right? It's something that we have to learn on an everyday basis. And definitely, like I said, for myself, I reinvent myself. I evaluate my courses. I evaluate how the students are doing in my courses every semester. And then I tweak it, right? Because every semester is different. You're not going to get the same set of students semester after semester. So you have to continue to develop new ways to reach the group that you have at that time, right? What works for one group of students may not work for another group of students. And I always tend to keep that in the back of my mind. All right, so asynchronous is important. The importance of asynchronous learning is the varying skill levels, right? So through diversifying your learning tools for a variety of learners, because remember, we teach asynchronous, you don't know what type of skill sets you have, that you're on a spectrum, right? So you may have some students who are visual students. You may have some students who are auto that pretty much respond better to audio. And you have some students that are kinesthetic learners, right? So you need to be flexible, right? Because it allows for students to take the time they need to complete the required tasks and assignments, right? Because of their personal and professional lives, right? So you have to do that within your assignments as well, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but there are some students who complain, oh, you're giving too much work, or you're not giving enough work, or I got 2 jobs, professor, and I got 3 kids, and this is a lot of work. And, you know, at the same time, you know, I'm not saying that we're supposed to give them less work, but the goal is to really be able to give them what they need so that when they leave the course, they're learning. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. So I think as asynchronous instructors is having superpowers. Yes, we do have superpowers. And why do I say that we have superpowers? Well, we can create inclusive and equitable online learning environments, right? When you're online, I think better you can design your courses, your wording, your materials that are more inclusive, right? And they're equitable online, and you can create a better learning environment for your students. And we can vary with our pedagogies. Nowadays, they have so many. They have trauma-informed, different types of pedagogies that we can incorporate into our day-to-day lesson plans or week-to-week lesson plans for our students. We can make use of productive failures. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we start out at the beginning of the semester and we see, okay, maybe the students aren't doing as well as we would like for them doing in their writing assignments or in their evaluations into their quizzes and stuff. So we have to look at that not as failures, but on a spectrum that they're beginning to grow, right? For what? Long-term success. One of the things I measure throughout the semester is, are the students improving? Right? And I do check-ins, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but I do check-ins along the semester to see what is it that I can change in my delivery that can help the students retain the information, comprehend the information, and better, ultimately get better for long-term success in completing the course. We can provide a seamless structure, right? We can help students understand all the pieces of a process or a concept through creative thinking. And I love that. You know, does anybody disagree with it? Does anybody have to think we do not have superpowers? Can someone add to that? No, yes. All right, so asynchronous interactions we need to look at two things. We need to look at our content, like how are we making our content more diversified, and social content, right? How are we also looking at that in terms of making it diversified, right? So we have to look at both of those things, socially and content-wise. All right, so diversifying learning techniques. What do I mean by that? Well, by creating and designing our course instructions, our materials, our techniques, our strategies with diversity in mind, this helps asynchronous instructors to what? To address inequality, right? We have to give, if we have to give more materials for the student that may not learn as quickly as some of the other students, right? We don't know. I mean, I don't know what level you teach. I've taught undergraduate and I've taught graduate courses. Some students don't all go to the same high school and develop the same way coming out of high school, coming into college. So we may have to address those inequalities once they get to college, right? We need, if I'm reading different students' papers and I'm looking at one particular student's and I find that that particular student's paper may not be up to par, then I'm going to address it by maybe giving them referrals or giving them information on where they can get additional help, or even within my course, I'll provide extra materials for them just to help that one student. Of course, all students will have access to it and it's available to them, but I'm really putting certain resources in for those students that I feel that need the extra support, right? Meet diverse learning needs, that would be inclusive of that. Build emotional connections with our students. I think that's the biggest thing I hear instructors say, that I don't have emotional connection with our students. But, you know, for me, I can only speak for me. I never feel like I never have emotional connection with my students, because in designing my assignments and using different delivery options within the course, I try to invoke emotion in them, like give them something that I know that they will react to. Therefore, we can sit and resolve it together through recognizing that we are emotionally connected to this particular concept or this particular topic, right? Use diverse and inclusive course content. Just what I was saying. Use multimedia with text alternatives. Now we're doing Ally, right? It can reach a variety of people that have issues in terms of how they read information. Teach powerful skills to develop emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence. How do we solve this particular dilemma, right? What are the steps that are involved? How do you go about resolving a situation? Provide different ways to participate, right? That's important, right? Some people, yes, they like wikis. Some people like discussions. It depends, right? But I want to give them a variety of ways to participate. Allowed accommodations, right? Accommodations, right? Sometimes some students, I don't know, certain schools or certain people, they identify students that need certain accommodations, extra time to do assignments and so on and so forth. Maybe a little one-on-one. Yes, asynchronous says we really don't have much contact with students, but if I feel that this student is struggling, you know, I always make my cell phone available to the students. So if they need to talk to me on one-on-one, so I can get into their head so that I can help them get through the course and learn something from it, which is really what our goal is, I will do it. Practice exams, and then I give additional writing samples of what I'm looking for. Sometimes I even take the students samples within the class, those students that did well or actually hit the target issue within the question I presented to them. And then I will send it to them all by email and say, okay, these just a few students papers I chose. Of course, there are more, but this is what I was looking for in terms of answering the call of the question. Right? Do I have any questions so far on what I'm talking about? Is anyone intrigued by anything so far they wanted me to elaborate? Yes or no? Okay, I'll move on. All right, then you have what they call active learning tasks, right? Active learning tasks is really what builds engagement through course-specific problem solving and analytical activities. Probably the hardest thing to do, or focusing on real life situations and scenarios. Like I said earlier, when I was in another training, I tend to look through the news. I tend to look through social media. I tend to look in different areas so I can see what that age group or that spectrum of students are thinking about, right? Taking real life situations, to me, it's really what evokes emotion. It really is what connects us to the students, right? Because sometimes students make divisions between I'm a student and you're a professor. No, we are the same, right? We all live in the same environment. We all experience the same things, maybe not 100% the same way, right? But we all experience things as humans, and as humans, I want to know your perspective, right? I want to know where you're coming from. So if you were faced with this situation. So these types of active learning tasks prove to be more effective way of teaching because your students feel that they are actively engaging in a learning process and a community, right? Online, that's the key to asynchronous learning is being diverse, understanding the diversity that we have of ideals among us as a group, and being able to share as a community together, right? I look at each one of my courses as a community in itself. And that way, when we're focusing on the concepts in that particular course, we're doing it as a group, as if we're sitting in a coffee shop and we're actually just talking about day-to-day current events. Okay. What is active learning? Well, Bloom's taxonomy says that creating, evaluating, analyzing, applying, understanding, and remembering, right? So students that are engaged in more activities than just listening, right? Just, recording a lecture or professor just talking, they are more involved in dialogue, right? Debate, writing, and problem solving as a higher order of thinking, right? So if you give students a real live problem and say, what do you think about this? Of course, I do tell them, I want you to incorporate the core concepts from the chapters and additional readings that I give you. But I want you, from your perspective, how are you interpreting this? And how would you work through this problem? And of course, through different methods, which we're going to talk about in a minute, where debate comes in. And some people think of debate as a bad thing. But of course, if it's a respectable debate can really give life to ideals, right? Debating one another, because it challenges us to support and explain our positions, right? All right. Develop stronger emotional connections, right? How do we do that? I mean, some people say, oh, it's hard online to be with an asynchronous professor and we don't know who they are and we don't have emotional connections. But I was reading my evaluations, which I think all instructors should do. We may not like them all the time, but I read mine and I look forward to reading them because it helps me to develop myself or maybe change something that I could do better, right? One of my students said, oh, Professor Martin, I love the way, even though we were asynchronous, I always felt like I was connected to you. And I always felt like you were there for me. And I felt that to be touching, right? But and by using, and I use a lot of interactive elements, such as a small instructor and introduction video. I mean, I give us, with students, you have to give, some people think when you say things in a greater amount of a time, you know, to get all the information in there, that's helpful. No, sometimes short, clear, and concise information for students works better for them, right? Because sometimes they lose attention if you put too much information in, right? So more is not better, it's just more sometimes, right? So you want to be a short introduction video about yourself at the beginning of the semester, right? And about yourself is, say something funny or something that they can relate to as a parent, as a student, or living in New York, or what it's like on the train or whatever, but you incorporate it into your instructions for the course or what you expect. I like to be on the same, I like for students to feel like they're on the same level with me emotionally, right? That I learn from them as much as they learn from me. And I say that repeatedly, you know, throughout the semester, because it's true, right? They teach me something new every semester. But the introduction video is the way that you get your students to get to know who you are as a person, not just as an instructor, but as a person, because we are people too, and we have emotions and we go through the same things that they go through. And I think that helps the student connect to you as a person, not just as their instructor. Interactive meet and greet games for the students, same thing. You can come up with certain games, you know, maybe have them describe themselves and say, oh, where do you think I live? Or where do you think I come from? Or things of that nature, right? Certain short games you can get for them to get to know you. Well, I like to look at this one. Who do you think this one is, right? Introductory discussion forums. I do that every semester. I start out, actually, I do the video and the introductory discussion forum where I have the students introduce themselves. Sometimes I give them questions so they can answer them. And sometimes I just say one question and have them elaborate. I also post using the same questions. I give them, you know, I let them know who I am, what's my background, that I'm a single mom, right? And I'm very proud of my son, right? He's in college too, right? You know, I let them know those things, and the things I get back from them is like, wow, yeah, I'm a single mom too, and I know how hard it is to raise a son in New York, and I'm struggling, and I'm trying to do the best I am. Or they'll be like, Professor, oh, we love that you did this in your career, and it seemed I want to be like you, and I had an interest, and that's where I want to go. So from the beginning, that's how I start to establish a relationship with them without even seeing them in person, right? So all of these can help to build an active learning course and community with the students at the onset so that they can feel more connected to you, to their colleagues, and to your course. Any questions? Let me ask a question. Does anyone here today use any of these techniques, like the introduction video or the discussion forum or any meet and greet games?
I do. I use all of those and
Okay.
and record. Actually, I think I go overboard, and I appreciate what you're saying about less is more. I record 2 videos a week, an intro to the week and a review of the week. So I might be, I might need to dial it back a little bit.
And like I said, when you do your check-ins with your students, you should ask them that. You know what I mean? Like, just to see
Yeah, I give
if
them
that,
surveys. Oh, I'm sorry, I
that's
interrupted
good.
you.
But you know, surveys are good too. I'm not saying they're not, but sometimes I like to hear their own words instead of me giving them choices. You know, I want to hear what they have to say exactly, but whatever works, right? I'm not saying what you're doing is too much, but you have to be able to see what works for you that semester with your students, right? And I like the review videos, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, and I like that you are kind of vulnerable with your students, or transparent, I should say.
Yes.
I really like that you're relatable, and that also what you're saying about indicating that you're looking to learn from the students also, which I think kind of, changes the kind of power dynamic a little bit, and
Mhm.
enables students to feel like, hey, this is not some authoritarian figure sitting on a hill. This is someone who's also, as you're saying, a human being that I can relate to. And I think it's really important.
And it is, especially during these trying times, right? The last 2 years have been brutal for everybody. And a lot of students, whether we know it or not, they're going through a lot of trauma, and so are we, right? In our own personal lives, we don't tell them that, right? But at the same time, I can tell when my students writing, I can feel it through their writing. I could certain things that we talk about, I could feel that something's going on in their life, right? Or they're not giving the assignments 100%. So I have to reach out to them and say, hey, what's going on? Please call me. We can talk about it. And sometimes they do call me and talk about it. And I was like, okay, well, all you had to do is tell me, and then I would have, given you extra articles or certain things, or I give them more clarification on some areas that they can be confused about. Right? Because sometimes students, because of the power dynamic, they may feel that they're asking too many questions, right? And I let them know there's never a dumb question. There's never a time where there's too many questions. So I'm okay with that, right? Because my goal is I want you to learn, right? So interactive tasks are more effective than listening to a lecture and taking notes, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but that's a part of the task can be, but you need more interactive mixed in with that, right? Because you don't want them to get set in their ways and it's routine and like, oh, this is what we're doing again this week. No, you want every week to be different. I don't know about you, but any job, I had the type of jobs where every day was different for me, right? And it was the people who did the same thing every day, usually the workers that got burnt out, right? So the same thing for asynchronous. You want to make sure that, every week is something different, right? It's 15 weeks. I'm not talking about 15 different things, but I'm talking about a set of things within the 15 weeks and you mix them all up, right? Because today's generation of students have more of a connection with items that are more sensory in nature and involve multimedia. I don't know if you ever taught in a class, the hardest thing was to keep the kids off their phones, right? like every time you turn around, they're on their phones. You're like, put your phone away, put your phone away, put your phone away. And it's like, that's their life. I don't know if you have older children. I have a 21-year-old. He's constantly on his phone. His friends are on their phone. I see them when they come over. It's like everything is multimedia. You see it on television. You see it everywhere, right? So do we have to connect with them in that way? Absolutely. Right? If we want to engage them, we have to learn about it. And I know it's hard. And somebody said, well, what about the older students? I have older students too, and I deal with them. I make sure I put something in there for them, right? Older students are more about wisdom. They've been around a couple of blocks already. So you have to put something in there that's relatable to them as a grown adult with grown children, right? But even grown adults in our class have somewhat of a insecurity when they're dealing, because they know that a lot of the students in the class, whether online or in person, are younger than them, right? Are younger than them. Somebody wanted to say something? No? Okay, I thought I heard somebody. So using course materials that are based on real life scenarios that encourage participation, having a choice, like how do you make a choice based on these set of factors? What choice would you make if you was in this situation? Collaboration with one another, right? Working with one another and discussion equals more student engagement, obviously. Interactive learning is considered the most effective in helping your students feel more involved with the course material, right? If they can't interact with it, they're not going to want to deal with it, right? They're going to lose attention on it, right? You want to get them looking at something on the page that pops to them and say, wow, this is interesting, right? And I know I'm giving them something interesting by the comments in the discussion forums, or the comments in the blogs, or the comments in the journals, right? Journal writing, we have the ability for them to write in a journal, and we read it. Sometimes we can have the whole class read it, or just it comes to just the professor. And if I give them something that's from a personal perspective, I don't allow the other students to see it, right? I only see it myself and make my comments, right? Or even challenge them on it, right? Variety of media types. Our students are regularly engaging on their phones, videos, and photos, right? Asynchronous instructors, we can use a variety of multimedia options like mashups or Flickr, where we share photographic images, voice links with explanations directly related to the images posted on the notes. That's you. Was that you, Brad? Did I say Brad? Is it Brad? No, that's not Brad. Who's the one who said that he gives explanations, makes recordings for explanations? That's you. That's fine. Slide share slide presentations, documents, portfolios, YouTube videos. Additional links for more clarification can be linked, or more articles. I heard one professor say she doesn't like to give her students movies. Why? Sometimes I choose movies for them to watch and then give them a question to think about it. Not any movie, but the movie has an underlying theme of it. It has something in it that I want them to get out of it that's related to the topic of our week. And sometimes the students say, I never even watched that movie, Miss Martin. And looking from it from the perspective that you asked us to look at, it made me think about things differently, right? And of course, all these things, these techniques, you have to choose carefully, right? You have to view it yourself and see how it connects. I once had a professor, and she took us to, it was a movie about love, but it was a poetry class, and she had us look at this movie and then write. She gave us something to write about it, but it was interesting, and it was about our feelings on unconditional love, what it means to us, and it gave life to the poetry that she was giving us to read, because after we watched the movie. So that resonated with me, right? So I feel like at certain times, there are certain techniques and media things that you can use at different points and for different subjects and different times. You have to choose as a professor. Your material, you're the expert. So you should be able to choose certain things that you would know that would relate to your topics in your course. So the goal of all of these is we want to be sure that they fully understand how we want them to use them, right? I don't want you to just look at this. I want you to analyze this within this framework. And what we want them to comprehend about the course material. I mean, that's the whole point, right? If it's a law class 12 and I was teaching interview and investigative, or evidence, 12 angry men, what goes on? How does a jury analyze, evidence within the jury room? I once showed 12 angry men, right? For them to understand, what was the dynamics that was going on? How did their personal lives and viewpoints coming from different backgrounds and stuff affect their ability to make a decision on someone's life? That's important. Using cohort-based techniques. Do I have any questions at this point? Please stop me if you have questions. Okay. So using cohort-based techniques, right? Encourages students to think critically about their work outside of the scheduled sessions with their instructors, right? So through interactive teaching methodologies, you're prioritizing applied learning techniques that can take a variety of different delivery methods. I've been beating this like a drum since I started this whole seminar, using case studies with your discussion boards, right? A case study, you may have to come up with it. I like to use case studies where I take characters' names that they will recognize, people from Law and Order, or people like Kanye, or, I'll put them in my case story and say, okay, and put it into the context of what I'm trying to get them to understand in the book, right? And then we can discuss about it. And then obviously I have them to engage with one another. And I told them, don't just tell me you agree or disagree. I want something more substantive. I want you to look at what the person's saying and tell me truly what it is that you like about it and why. Right? And why? And myself, I also engage with them as well, but I don't really give feedback when I'm answering them. I pretty much, my job is I challenge them in their, I was like, okay, this is good, but what do you think about X, Y, and Z? Would this change anything? So I challenge them more, and then I give them feedback when I grade them, so that way they don't feel like I'm singling them out in front of their peers. And in the individual feedback, they can just, I that's why I give my critiquing, and in terms of how they can improve on the things that I need for them to improve in. Blogs and wikis assignments that require them to apply coursework concepts to real world problems. I use Google Chat on WhatsApp, or build a community within the course of students to converse with, and other colleagues on current events. I pose specific questions to the students, or I just checking in on whether they're comprehending the material. That's why I was telling you check-ins. I call them self-reflections. I do that throughout the semester. Are you understanding what's this week's material? What is it, about it that you feel that you did like? What is it that you didn't like? What is it that you still don't understand? Do you think I could have done something, explain it differently? I want to know what's going on in their head. And they'll be like, no, Professor, I understand everything that's going on. But you know what? In chapter 4, I felt like this was X, Y, Z. I'm like, really? So that, and then I don't grade them on that, right? The reflection part, it's just, they're like, well, why do we do this? Because it's feedback for me, right? If it allows me to see if I need to change, right? If I need to switch up on the delivery method, because, maybe I may need to tweak it so that you can understand it better. Pillars of cohort learning, knowledge transfer into learning, identify, assessing, question, assumptions through dialogue, right? Reflection, right? Learning from actions to solve a problem, action, right? You want all these things working together, right? Because that supports learning, diversity in learning, right? Storytelling. As a human being, when we hear or read a real life story, it helps us to relate to characters in it, right? Helps to make students feel emotions. It helps to show an application of a concept. It helps students to remember coursework, right? Sometimes you read a book and you read a story in a book, and all of a sudden you feel tears going down your eyes. What? Because it triggers something in us, right? So we want to do that to our students as well, right? Gamification. Some people's like, no, I'm not talking about, coming up with, sophisticated games. I'm talking about simple games that motivate students by using games, elements of games, right? Crossword puzzles, using the vocabulary from the chapter, right? Some people like to do crossword puzzles, right? Scramble games, using the concepts of the chapter, right? The goal is to maximize enjoyment and engage by capturing the interest of the learners and inspiring them to continue to learn, right? If they don't know they're learning, they will learn more, right? It's like with our kids, we don't always teach them lessons by saying, sit down, I'm going to teach you this lesson. No, we do it in different ways So they don't know that they're learning, but they are learning. And I actually caught that trick from my mother, because she used to do that to me all the time. Gamification example, show and tell with or without a video. Sometimes when we come back from vacation, the summers or the winters, I'll ask them, post some pictures about, what you do. And people will post some interesting pictures about, things that they did over the break. Different things they did over the break, and enjoyment. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Show and tell, tell me what you did over your break. Show me pictures. And then I get to see their family. Some people pictures of their dogs, some people pictures of restaurants. Like one guy said, oh, my uncle owns a restaurant, and, pretty pictures. And this is how I decorated my tree. Or, it depends, right? Scavenger hunts, right? Scavenger hunts. You can tell them to find certain things that are connected to the concepts in the class, that they can find outside. I want you to come back to class, and I want you to take pictures when you get a chance over the weekend. I know you're busy, but over the weekend, I want you to find these things that relate to this concept. Poll questions. Somebody say they do poll question surveys. Those are fine. Those are fine. If I could go anywhere, sometimes you need a break, right? You want to know what people dream of, right? If I can go anywhere, I probably during the pandemic, I did that a lot, right? Because we couldn't go out of our house, right? So if I could go anywhere, it would be a beach with blue water, or maybe Paris, or maybe Rome, who knows? Or maybe Korea. That's one of my bucket lists, Korea. Guess who's celebrity interview? My students love that. Guess who this is? I'll describe characteristics about a person, and it's a celebrity that they know. I don't do Kanye much because everybody knows him, man with the hood. I don't know, but I don't do that. But I usually pick one and say, guess who this is? Sometimes you need to throw those in with the assignments to give them something to take their mind off of the rigidness of the course, and just let them woosah, breathe a little bit, right? Have a little fun with them. Crossword puzzles based on the chapter material. I mentioned that before, right? That's a great way to get students to remember vocabulary, especially when we give them assessments that involve vocabulary. A lot of times crossword puzzles, scramble, those type of things are good for them. Helps the brain function. Okay. Live sessions. Now, in asynchronous class, yes, at John Jay, they say we don't have to have them, but I do have them occasionally throughout. I don't have them every month, but I do have them throughout the semester. And it's usually during Q&A. If I see something that's off, or everybody's not really doing the way I would like for them to do, I was like, you know what, we need to have a session. Sometimes they come, sometimes they go, but that's okay. I record it and I post it. Special instructions on a project. If I have a major project coming up, I usually do a live session where I clarify the instructions, right? Because sometimes you can give kids instructions, but sometimes you verbally have to tell them. So I usually do collaborative sessions for special projects. Zoom meetings. One of my courses, I have a big presentation at the end of the semester. It's asynchronous, but it's mandatory. Now that one's mandatory, and it's at the end of the semester, and I start telling them at least 2 months prior to the end of the semester, and I say, okay, this is mandatory. Everybody has to come to the Zoom session. I make sure it's in the evening when I think most students are off, and I tell them, make time. This is why I'm telling you 2 months ahead, and they have to present a presentation on something related, a case study related to the course. And I get 100% attendance. I've never had a student that didn't show up for that course. And of course I make it mandatory. It's a big part of it. It's not a big part of their grade, but it's a chunk of their grade, you know, so a lot of them do come and they stay. Last time we stayed a little bit over. We went to 10 o'clock, which I didn't intend to go that long, but I would say more than half the class actually stayed to that time. I recorded it, so I was able to go back and review it and grade them, and then, you know, discuss, made my comments in their feedback. Because I think that was important, because this allowed me to see them, right? They had to put their cameras on because they had to present with their cameras on. So I actually got to see them and who they are and stuff. And I was surprised by some of them, and allowed me to engage with their peers. After they finished their presentation, then the students asked them a couple of questions. I asked questions. So it was interesting. I was very impressed by it. Meaningful feedback. I mean, yes. I mean, feedback provides students with personalized, specific information about their performance and their learning, right? It's reflective of positive reinforcement. But as much as we give them positive reinforcement, we have to give them constructive criticism, which focuses on helping students understand how to improve or expand on their thinking, right? We challenge them because I want you to be better, right? We're a work in progress, but I tell them all the time, you can do better. I know you can do better because I've seen your work all semester long, and I know that you could do better than this. So it should be reflective of appreciation, coaching them, and then evaluation. Like, I appreciate this point, but you got to go deeper, right? I need more explanation. I need for you to go into the chapter and dig deeper into those core concepts and applying them. And then I give them a hint. Right? That's the coach. I give them a little hint. Okay, why don't you look on page 25? Maybe that'll help you if you looked on that page. And then evaluation, of course, I give them an overview of the actual assignment and the grading, of course. So just to finish up, asynchronous learning involves a lot of things, right? Emails, blogs, pre-recorded lessons and webinars, which is fine, right? Online discussions, you know, we have so many tools at our hands, but, you know, the key is to make your course pop so that students, you know, they're coming there every week and they're like not just doing the assignment just to get it over with, but they're actually giving you something that's meaningful. And you know, we have to give tough love, right? Because the fact that some students have to have more structure than others, right? You have to be multifaceted when you're dealing with these students. You have to be because we're dealing with a diversity of students. You know, our students are all diversified, but we are one family. And someone asked me today what inspired me to be so inclusive and diversity in dealing with that with my students. Well, it comes from my own real life. Not everybody has that advantage, but I do, right? I come from a very diverse family, racially, ethnically, on all levels. And, you know, my mom, since I was young, one of the things she taught me was variety is the spice of life, you know, and I teach that to my students and I give that to them. And yes, I do give a part of myself to them. And I tell them all the time, if I give a piece of you and I'll just be happy that when you are in your careers, in your life, something that Professor Martin said to you once said, oh, you know, the light bulb will go on and be like, wow, that really, I remember when she said this and this is what happened, you know. So, you know, that's my goal, is just to be a small stepping stone in their way to their career. And a lot of them later on, you know, on Facebook or whatever, they'll write little things to me and say little things to me, you know, and it lets me know that I'm doing my job right. So that's it for today. Any questions? Any questions, any comments?
Thank you.